As Seen on Screen, and I know that you've come up with a couple of twists
I
in
did.
terms of As Seen on Screen, and that
Yes.
is not a surprise. So I'm just going to be here for that journey and see what you come up with. Um, Obviously, the majority of the As Seen on Screen, just for those who have joined the podcast since the first episode and haven't got to that episode, just want to obviously highlight what it is. So effectively, it's watches seen on screen, very self-explanatory, but predominantly looking at popular culture, films, TV, and all that kind of stuff. Now, the idea is we come up with 3 watches each, so effectively 6 watches per episode. However, there is a caveat to one of them. The caveat to one of them is we would change one watch, a film, a TV, a character, whatever, that what particular watch, and we state why we would change it. Did it fit the storyline? Was it a story arc? Was it, you know, just product placement, or does it fit the character? Okay, so that's just to kind of switch up a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to do. And like I said, we'll take it in turns and basically, hopefully, highlight various films, TV references and/or screen-related references
Hmm.
that will be either nostalgic or completely new to you, and then you'll go off and watch it, review it, and/or in AJ's case, I'm sure play the game.
Mm. Mm.
So there
Mm.
we go. Bro, before we get into that, obviously, standard Zulu Time podcast tradition. What watch have you got on your wrist today?
Well, in standard Analog Explorer fashion, I am contemporarily double wristing as usual. I was on a dive not almost 2 weekends ago, and so I still have my dive computer on my right wrist, and then on my left wrist, the Doxa is back on my wrist. I've been bouncing around the watch box for a bit, so I had the Baltic on, I had the Pulsar on. I've been bouncing around and stuff, and then yeah, the Doxa just naturally found itself back on my wrist. So the Clive Cluster 300T
I want
broken
to talk
record.
about that watch,
Oh,
by the way. Not
oh,
specifically your watch. I want to talk about the case finish on your watch. So
mm,
more detail to follow,
hmm.
obviously. Oh, sorry, not more detail to follow. Because I've just realized I'm recording it tomorrow. Guys, fast forward but rewind in time.
Wibbly wobbly,
Um,
timey wimey.
yeah, obviously we spoke about that episode with Joe. Spoke about it in an episode with Joe, which is obviously in the review for World Time. So went to see it, saw some loads of watches, had a catch up with Andreas and obviously other watch personalities, want a better expression. There was other people there who have podcasts, reviewers. There's obviously companies that I've interviewed. So shout out to Tom over at Clements Watches. Obviously good to see you as well. And our kind of resident in-house favorite British brand at the moment. I say at the moment, let's just say favorite British brand. um, Elliot Brown. Ian was there, and
Oh,
he showed us the new field watch, the Arm, and got to handle that for a little bit. Obviously he was flocked out with obviously people trying to come and see his wares, not just the Arm, but his wares in general. But bro, the Arm field watch, it has the very similar case finish as the Clive Cussler, and that's what it
mm-hmm.
kind of reminded me. I can see where that comes from. It's like this dark grey metal kind of stonewash case
Yep.
design. It really does suit itself for adventure. I can
Yeah.
see why Doxa chose it, and I can see why Doxa chose it again for the second edition of the Clive Cussler, and I
Mm-hmm.
can see
Mm-hmm.
why Elliot Brown took their own version of that
Yeah.
case finish. It's quite dark compared to your one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've not handled a Doxa
Yeah.
Clive Cussler edition in the metal.
Mm-hmm.
However, obviously from the images that you've sent and all that kind of stuff and conversations that we've had, comparing it to the Yarn is a lot darker, which is interesting. And I am obviously interested in, a year, 2 years, and beyond how that case finish handles up to some of the adventures that obviously people who own these arms now obviously will be putting them through. So there you
Yeah.
go. I just wanted to let you know that it was very similar, reminded me of you.
Yeah.
Um, if you want to go check out all the Wild Time kind of stuff, obviously check out the last episode with Joe. And we'll give you our honest opinions and all that kind of stuff. And actually, just so you're aware, it was actually just quite nice to meet Joe for the first time in real life. So there you
That's cool.
go. Bro, my wrist check is not a dive watch.
That's okay.
It's a chronograph.
But it's a very good chronograph.
Yeah, I've realized that I'm embracing the chronograph love a lot.
Hmm.
In the fact that I actually do believe that deep down I'm a chronograph guy, even though I don't want to admit it. But I've got the Seiko speed timer, the Jazz Def version of that. So Jazz Def standing for Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. This is a model which I bought off the previous owner. Shout out to Dev. Thank you
Dev!
for thank you for parting with your watch, bro. Got it serviced by B Vintage, and it couldn't be happier. It's a really cool watch. Not many in the world, to the point where look forward to this getting plastered all over the timely moments. Instagram, I was invited to take high-res images of this watch along with some other Seiko watches
Mm.
issued to the military. Um, as a part of a Japanese kind of coffee table book, effectively being produced in Japan. And the topic is Seiko military watches throughout the ages. Uh, Basically, the creator of this series of books found out that I had one, and they're quite hard to get hold of. And you mentioned to me actually when this watch came in, pretty sure anyway, that Seiko themselves don't have one in the museum.
When I was, I mean, again, this was 2016 when I was in Tokyo, visiting my brother by choice at Rising Sun Sailor, and we went to the old Seiko Museum before it went to Ginza, so it was out in the one of the suburbs outside of Tokyo. And yeah, I was looking because I know of the speed timers and such, and they had a speed timer, but they didn't have the Jazz Def. It was interesting because I mean, they had the Moonwalk one, or not the Moonwalk, the EVA one. They had
Hmm.
obviously the Tokyo Olympics, which I mean, I absolutely love that GMT. But yeah, it was interesting. They didn't have anything militaria, for lack of better terms. And
Hmm.
my bro Danny, who's pointing out, he's just like, well, you know, it's not. I mean, after post World War II, like there, it's kind of it's not taboo, but it's not a focus for them, just as a culture. And so something like Jazz Def, you're probably not going to see it in something like the Seiko Museum. And this, I mean, it was the Seiko Museum at the time was pretty small. But since then, I don't know if they've added one to the new one over in Ginza. But yeah, no, it was cool because I know the crest, and when
Yeah.
Dev posted those pictures, I was like, oh, whoa, very cool. And as I recall, like also that specific case is redesigned than the civilian one because the case back is different. It's actually like more bulbous or something like that. I can't remember. Than the
That also
stock.
wouldn't, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me about that. I mean, I also do know that um, it's a very specific thing in
Yeah,
terms of the case back. So the case back, for all intensive purposes, is actually sterile. And I say that because all the watch details, so case number, model, serial number to the watch itself, are actually on the inside.
yeah,
Whereas on the outside it is just got the winged cherry blossom, for want of a better expression.
yeah,
So it's been done like that from factory. This has not been a uh, operational sorry, urgent operational requirement, so UOR, where for example, a unit has gone with cash to a proprietor to buy something specific, and then they have dremeled in a logo
yeah.
or whatever.
Marlon
This
Brando
has
it.
been done,
Yeah.
yeah, this has been done from Seiko themselves, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because if it had been done in the UOR methodology, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that, you would find all the case back serial markings of the original 6139s, as you would expect,
Right.
plus something that would denote it to be issued to Jazz Def. So yeah, very cool watch. I enjoy
Super cool.
wearing it. um it is one that won't ever go because, like I said,
No.
it's just cool, right? My kind of aim in life at some point is to still visit Japan because I want to
Oh,
go there anyway, whether I was a watch guy or not. However, I do know that when I do go to Japan, at every time that happens, that this watch will definitely come with me, because how cool would that be to
oh,
take
dude.
to Japan and get all the Japanese street photography photos, but then also make that little watch pilgrimage to the Seiko Museum at Ginza and kind of show off a little bit, because I like to think that they would find it at least interesting, you
Oh,
know.
yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because like so I had my SKX 007 and my Citizen Eco Drive when I was over there, and I basically wore the absolute stuffing out of my SKX everywhere I went, and I showed them at the museum and stuff, and I had my modded bezel on it and stuff, and they thought it was cool. Like, here's a foreigner that, went all the way out to the outskirts to come to the silly Seiko Museum and stuff, and was enthusiastic. They loved my son because he was just a baby toddler. But yeah, no, it was cool because, like, in talking with Danny and stuff and like showing him, he was still kind of closeted watch fam at the time. He was still very quasi watch muggle. He was kind of coming out, and it was just cool showing him like the magic lever and stuff. But ever since going to Japan, like, the joke between me and Danny is that once you go to Japan, you never stop talking about it. And like I've said on multiple shows, I was never a Japanophile. It took one trip, and I'm just like, I want to go back. I gotta go back. It's just cool.
Yeah,
Such a cool culture.
everyone I've spoken to is like the same thing. So yeah, I look forward to doing that and bringing to you guys the Japan section of every episode of the Zulu Time podcast
Yeah.
thereafter. But yeah, so yeah, that's the wrist check, bro. A very cool watch. So you're my guest as per. So do you want to get into the main topic?
Oh yeah.
Do you
Oh
want to?
yes.
So I don't know what you're gonna pick. Whether it's gonna be your wild card in quoted comments, or if it's going to be a little bit more of a traditional as seen on screen, uh, option choice or whatever you want to refer to it. But yeah, bro, you're the guest, so take it away.
Sweet.
And let's see what you've got.
Okay, so I've got so I got a little bit of a preamble just to set it up because I'm doing something a little bit different. So every watch podcast that does an as seen on screen, they focus on film, which is cool. I get it, but it's been done. One of the things that drives me nuts as, watch fam is, as a gamer, also in video games, watches have a critical like tie in some cases. And so I wanted to start with my as seen on with arguably probably the started it all for everybody in the watch fam, and that is, where were you in 1997? Well, if you
I
were
can tell
me,
you exactly where I was in 1997. Do you want me to go for it?
yes, please tell me, where were
Right,
you in 1997?
1997, we had just, I say the family had been posted to Cyprus the first time.
Ah,
Okay, I was 5. Now that
oh,
that reference to me, bro, did not exist. I won't lie to you until 1998. Okay, and the
okay.
reason for that was because the youth club, um, you weren't allowed to go unless you
Mm,
were kind of 6 and above, and even then you could only go um for short amounts of time, and obviously it was split in age category, right? So to me, that reference, which I'm not going to ruin, I'm not going to spoil it, didn't actually come around to me until end of 1998, early
okay,
99. Okay, so I
okay,
was a little bit older. I'd have been about 7, closer to 7 when that reference came into my life, right? However, those of you in the audience out there who've been with the Zulu Time podcast since its beginning will know that I have owned that watch.
yeah. So in 1997, I'm a bit older than you. So I was in junior high and I was with my mates and we were rocking the N64. And of course, so Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, and GoldenEye was the games that would always be busted out. And then if you're into WWF wrestling, it would be something like Raw you'd also play. But GoldenEye is unique because in the Watch Fam, it is the token game that gets referenced as like the impetus of a coordinated effort between a major watch brand and a component of a game that still today is like a cultural pop culture icon by today's.
I rebought it in COVID and got it stolen off me, bro.
Really?
Yes, I bought a in-box N64 um
Huh.
set with GoldenEye
I
with
didn't know
GoldenEye in
this
the
about you.
box, and I had it for about a month, and then things happened, and I never got it back.
Huh.
Okay, but yeah, it was stolen off me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the reference. Yeah, so cool. I had the exact set that you're
Yeah.
showing right there.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, immediately, and oh, by the way, if you're watching the Analog Explorer side of things, this is a joint where you're actually going to see video. We're going to try some video in this episode, just because it's visual and I felt like doing something weird. So in GoldenEye, like obviously you're the Pierce Bronson, 007. And in that era, of course, we have the Omega Seamaster 300 in quartz. And I mean, this is like it's perfect. It is for that Bond and for the era of the 90s. For the screen of the film as well as in game, it was the best. This is like there's a reason why it is like the pinnacle of references when it comes to kind of bridging the screen, whether it's from film to gaming, because here
Mm.
you have the helium escape valve up on the top left. You've got the skeleton hands, crown at 3. Okay, and of course we saw Pierce Bronson do cool things like the bezel shot a laser from the pip and all this jazz. And then if you were a gamer, you had that something similar on wrist. Again, 1997 graphics, but if you look at this, you have a what looks like a pusher up at the top, but that would be where the helium escape valve was. And this is part of the interface of the game. Like you use this,
Mm.
and it's a tool within the game,
It's also a
and
weapon
it's
in the game.
also
It's also a weapon
a
because you can
weapon.
use the laser,
Yeah, you go
can't
around.
you? In multiplayer and stuff, you can actually use the laser.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, because the game is very, again, take away the graphics, but the actual game, the levels that you play are very close to the film.
Yep.
It's a plot device, for want of a better expression, in the game because you actually have to laser your way out of the armored train.
Mm-hmm. And
Oh,
so
bro,
I
I'm
don't. Yeah.
just I'm applauding you because it's a great, yeah, it's just good.
Yeah.
I might have to speak to my nephew about buying my Seamaster back from him.
it's it's so good. So like and as a gamer, when you see this, like, and again, 1997 graphics, we're talking about 64-bit graphics, but it's enough if you were a Watchfam kid, and you look at this and you're like, ah, it's totally the Bond Omega, but it's translated for the video game. It's not a direct one-to-one. There's no mention of Omega, but you look at this, you see the skeleton, like they even skeletonized the hand. Like you can tell that this is Bond's watch. And as a gamer, you had it as a tool, you had it as part of the interface, and like you said, it was also a weapon. And it was just cool because it was arguably one of the first nods of a proper branded. I'm going to get to another one that was even more branded. Watch in video games, and because it was the 90s, 1997, this kind of marked it. The clock, the moment the clock tower got struck by lightning, right? And from here, we've seen other franchises, all the way to contemporary like Far Cry. Far Cry partnering with Hamilton. Not a franchise that I game with. I respect Hamilton. But again, it's interesting that even today,
Mm.
it's not as well talked about as films because arguably more people watch films. I would say
Hmm.
that the rise of video games actually trump that because they make more money than Hollywood, as I understand. But it's interesting to see that, something like this, Bond, here's a direct one-to-one translation, and it is not an exact product placement. It is adapted for a video game,
Yeah,
and it's cool. So that's my
it
first
is
pick.
very cool. It is
Never
very
would
cool.
I wouldn't change a damn thing about the video game version of the Omega Seamaster in GoldenEye for N64.
Big fan. Big fan. So obviously your pick is just. I'll just leave this episode as it is now and just quit, shall we?
I've got two more because you told me to do my
I
research.
know, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. So firstly, yeah, amazing. Love a Seamaster 300. I think as well, personally, in my opinion, that size case Seamaster is the best of the contemporary Seamasters.
I agree.
Um, I've owned it. Like I said, I owned it for a good few years actually before I passed it on to my nephew. He wanted an investment and he likes
Mhm.
blue watches, so that works really well for him. He's not
Perfect.
watch guy. He's not a watch guy, even though he does only he owns an Amiga and an Elliott Brown. He's definitely not a watch guy, but he always wears them, which is really nice. So obviously being a quartz works out really well for him because stuff like servicing, he's just it doesn't focus on him, and that's absolutely fine. But phenomenal watch. If I was to have any Bond watch,
Mm,
I've always said that I would have either, well, I'd have to have a Seamaster of that case generation, for want of
yeah.
an expression. So anything between Piers Brosnan, because he was my Bond, for want of an expression, he's the Bond I grew up with,
Mm,
right through to Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, because he even wears it when he plays poker against Lashif.
Yeah.
And it's also the watch that he takes off and uses as a knuckle duster in
Yeah.
the end scene of Casino Royale. Um, I'm genuinely surprised that that watch doesn't get more screen time, actually, because obviously they were focusing on the planet Ocean, weren't they, and all that kind
Yes.
of stuff.
Which is
So
also a very cool Bond watch, but that is a topic for a
very
different
cool.
pod.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're gonna have to do a Bond episode at some point. Mainly because after the joy that was No Time to Die and all that kind of stuff, Amiga released on their James on their Amiga Lifestyle magazine, they actually did a lowdown or rundown article of every single James Bond watch and pairing this, you like this, and apologies to those who obviously don't drink in the audience, but they did a James Bond alcoholic drinks and cocktails, pairing it with Witch Watch, as it were, loosely. And they
Awesome.
basically went to all the locations in the books where James Bond had certain cocktails.
Rad.
And these cocktails and stuff and drinks are still on the menus there. They gave the prices at the time that the book the magazine was released. So you're looking 20, I think it's 20, well, it might have been slightly earlier, so it might have been 2019,
Hmm.
just before COVID, or maybe just after COVID's lockdown. But you get the point. A few years back,
Yeah.
and they told you, how Ian Fleming effectively came up with these drinks, what the ingredients were, what to expect if you go to these locations. When obviously in the snazzy photos, they had a different Bond watch at every bar location, which is really cool. And it's
Super
something that
cool.
I still do want to do. Um,
A Bond pub crawl.
is well, yeah, effectively a Bond pub crawl. It'd be the most expensive pub crawl in London ever.
Ever. Yeah.
However, I think even if you just pick one a month, or you say, well, I'm going to do the drink from the films or the books that you really like, and you limit it to one or two, I think as an evening in London, it's probably quite a cool experience.
Totally.
But yeah, bro, I applaud you with your first one. So I'm now going to attempt, okay, to get the same nostalgic feeling with my first one. I'm now going to flip them around in the order that I present them in. So you may have mentioned it in funny enough, even in talking about how important it was for for Amiga and Bond in the N64 game, you actually referenced it. You said it was like the lightning striking the clock tower,
Hmm.
which can only be one film, and that is Back to the Future.
Yep.
So it's also another film that I grew up with. I'm not a child of the 80s. However, I would say that if you're a child of the early 90s, you are effectively still a child of the 80s because the technology was the same. Um, so there's only one watch that can be spoken about really in Back to the Future, even though there are two. So there's two main watches. So Doc Brown wears a Seiko um, A82-6, okay, on the
Mm.
Velcro strap. Okay, you see that when he is actually remote piloting or remote driving the DeLorean, the time machine.
Hmm.
And then the more prevalent watch in the film, which is Marty McFly's Casio calculator watch.
Oh yeah.
So I want to bring this up. Okay, so um, it is a watch that I've handled. It's actually a watch, bro, that I've gifted to people because it's cheap, cheerful, and it gets that nostalgia nod. And it's quite a famous watch as well in the fact that it's also featured in Stranger Things.
Oh, interesting.
One of the children, I can't remember which character it was off the top of my head because I've not watched Stranger Things in a while. But as we all know, again, being a child of the early 90s, I like to think technically the 80s in terms of technology and references are pretty much the same. The Stranger Things, again, is very nostalgic, isn't it? So everything is kind of period correct. One of the children wears the Casio calculator watch. Now, off the top of my head, and from the research that I have conducted, the original version of the calculator watch actually isn't made anymore.
Huh.
And it's kind of an update. So it's basically the same watch, but with a different module in it, from what I could tell. Effectively, they stopped making the original module and they upgraded it, and then they just phased out the old one.
Gotcha.
Um, so yeah, you can still buy it, obviously, they're on Amazon. But it's that, it's the calculator watch. What else can I say? It's on a black strap, it's very light, it's water resistant, and it's got a shit ton of buttons on the front of it. Um, that's really all I've got for you.
Yeah.
But every time you see it, that to me is obviously the watch of the watch of the nerd.
Yeah.
It sounds really
Oh,
bad. It's like
completely.
watching a nerd,
It
right?
was.
You know, and what I like about it is the fact that every single time I've gifted one to someone, it even to someone who's not a watch, person, I just, sometimes I gift watches because I want someone to become a watch person. It never
Yeah,
works,
yeah, same here.
but the reaction to that watch every time is the same reaction. It's one of absolute smiles, and they love it. And like I said, it's just cool because,
It
like I
is.
said, it's accessible, it's cheap, people can still use it, and it gets conversations going.
Yeah.
And that's what I find with that watch. So that was my first pick. You know, um, Doc Brown's watch not is cool, but not as cool.
Nah,
But yeah, Marty McFly's calculator watch is
primo.
definitely up there.
That's
So
cool, man. Yeah.
yeah, there you go, bro. That leads you on to your second pick, bro.
My
Off you go.
second pick. So in the gaming ecosystem and the up until I got onto the PS3, there was only one game franchise that I spent hours, days, years of my life
Hmm.
living in. And again, I'm quite a little bit older than you. So for me, Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider series
Hmm.
was the pinnacle of my 3D gaming life. You know, when Lara Croft debuted on the Sega Saturn and then later got ported to the PlayStation 1, you
Hmm.
know, I remember sitting because my mom and I would go to like the weekend matinees on base, and the library on base, you could check out a video game console and play right there in the library. They had a couple of stations that you could plug in a thing, and they had the latest and greatest breaking technology at the time, which was the Sega Saturn. And I remember throwing in Lara Croft in my teenage formative years, and I was like, this is the coolest thing. I'm an adventurer. I am this British woman, and I'm raiding tombs and fighting bad ninjas and crazy animals in the jungle.
I was about to say,
What?
don't forget the crocodiles in the cave.
And the crocodiles, and then also there's a T Rex. I
Um,
can do all the references, but like,
they're all locking the butler in the cupboard. If you remember that, I
yep,
think it's
yep,
Tomb Raider 3 when you can do her control episode where you learn to control Lara is in the mansion.
yep,
And
yeah.
if I
That's your
remember
proving grounds and
rightly,
stuff.
the
Yeah,
proving
yeah,
ground, yeah. And if I
yep.
remember rightly, the butler, who I cannot remember his name, is walking
Nobody.
around with with a tea tray, and you can
Yes,
lock
he would
him in
always
a
follow you.
cupboard.
Yep.
Yes.
So Lara is interesting because in the canon of Tomb Raider, she's quite a bit evolved over the years. I mean, she's no
Mhm.
longer the 1996 version that we know and remember with the blue tank and stuff. They still kept the blue tank, but they've focused more on the psychological effects that created her as a character. And not to give any spoilers, but basically in the 1990s version of Lara, she's older, educated, lost her parents. And
Mhm.
that's basically all that we really kind of know. And that's what spurred her to be the tomb raiding person that she is. In the 2020s version of Tomb Raider, she is a student at sea, and she gets she's a student at sea, but she's doing I'm using the wrong terminology, but basically she's doing a kind of a research and recon type of thing.
Mhm.
She ends up on an island, and there's a lecture I used to give at my day job on video game history and
Mhm.
culture, and its impact on teaching and learning. And I would reference this first game, the new Tomb Raider that came out in
Yeah, and
2013.
it's a great game, by the way. Like I've
Fantastic game
played it a lot.
because I mean the thing about in my again I was a teenager. The thing that drove me nuts about Lara was here's a woman who's well educated, she's rich, she can globetrot, and yet she has to wield dual 45s to get any business done. What made the bridge
Yeah.
as a character? What, because she's not she's not Secret Service or not she's not special ops, she's not anything like that. How did the civvy go to becoming a necessity killer and get wrapped up in all of this dark shady stuff? And in the first reboot of the Tomb Raider franchise, they addressed it. And it's a quick action event, a little bit of a spoiler, but basically you have a choice. You're captured by these mercenaries on this
Mhm.
island, and you have one choice. survive or be raped and killed. The
Yeah.
game forces you as the player, you only have one choice.
Mhm.
And I use that in my lecture because a lot of people who aren't gamers didn't realize like the impact that video games have over film. Film gets a kind of a bad rap, like, oh, it's rotting the minds of the youth today. And then of course video games get a worse rap. But it's because video games, you have actionable ability. You have a choice.
Yeah.
But in some cases, just like in life, you don't have a choice. You have to survive or die. And I appreciate that they built that into that first game, because it also sets up for the other sequels of the game where
Mhm.
she's dealing with PTSD.
Yeah.
And it's just a very cerebral game, much more cerebral game than the 90s. But in the Tomb Raider franchise, I'm going to rewind back to the 90s where I came from. There was a watch made by a company called Timex. And just like my first pick with James Bond and 007's GoldenEye on the N64, on the PlayStation and also PC, there was Tomb Raider Chronicles, where these are kind of side stories outside of the main canon, leading from, at the time, it was going to Tomb Raider Revelations, which was arguably like the ending plot of that 90s series. And in it, they had a partnership. IDOS, Core Entertainment, and the Tomb Raider franchise had a partnership with Timex, and they created the TMX clip watch, for lack of better terms, a contemporary 1990s-ish, uh, early 2000s version of what a digital pocket watch ought to be. If you were a kid, like you said, of the 90s, in the aughts, everybody had carabiners. Like these were the
Yeah.
thing. Like, you
Attached to
know,
your chain, attached to a chain that was attached to your wallet.
exactly. Or like this wasn't just a push to just get and sell watches and stuff. They actually built it into also the game. So in the interface of Tomb Raider Chronicles, you actually see her use it, jumping out of a building that she had just raided to get an artifact and such. And you actually get a glimpse of it. It's a black version with like a brown grip, and she
Hmm.
uses the Indiglo because
Yeah.
Timex, right? But also in the main game interface, you also get it right there, and it's a blue version. And this, I have as close of a version of that one as I could have gotten of the interface, which is a dark blue version with a light blue grip. But I mean, it was cool because again, even as a teenager, I was weird and quirky and had watches. And at this time in my watch journey, in high school, I was into pocket watches. So I actually had a different Timex at the time. It was a Timex Expedition. I still have it. It just is broken. This Timex Indiglo stainless steel pocket watch with 30 meters of water resistance. And I wore the ever loving stuffing out of this watch in high school. You'll see pictures of me with a pocket watch chain. And this was my predominant watch through high school. But I remember playing Tomb Raider, and I was like, "Oh, Lara Croft's so cool. She has a Timex just like me." Now I
Mm.
had an analog version, and she had the cool digital one. But for the era, um, again, like if you think of the early aughts, like Timex, like that it fits. It's kind of like it fits in a different way than the 90s Bond Seamaster fits the video game as well. Like we were coming into a new version of 3D graphics and arguably a new version of Quartz. Like this was, weird warpy fonts and stuff, Indiglo, and all of that for me surmises the late 90s and early aughts. And
Yeah.
there's no other watch that I feel Lara could have had at that time. Now, with that said, that Lara isn't the same as this new age Lara that we have. And in the video game, contemporarily, she does wear a watch. And it's
Mm.
not really identifiable, but because of
It
the.
is.
Oh, it is.
It is. I don't know the model, but on because I thought you were going to bring it up
Yeah.
in the beginning of the ship scene.
Yeah.
You, at least for the European release, there's a bit where the watch is on the desk,
Yeah.
and you can see it says G-Shock.
It does say G Shock. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a G-Shock, and I was very disappointed with the film. Obviously, the one of the more recent films that is
Yep.
pretty much the video game. She doesn't wear it. She doesn't wear a watch in the film.
Yeah.
And it's a missing thing, right? So it's a G-Shock. It's a yellow case G-Shock, as you can see on the screen there. But
Yep.
you don't actually. Again, it's one of those where it's just kind of like a generic G-Shock square,
Yeah.
and it's a clever way of kind of getting around it, right? Because the what's interesting is that there's other product placement in that scene.
Yeah.
So for example, she's listening on Beats headphones.
Yep.
So it's interesting what they tied in into the game and into those kind of cutscenes, really.
Hmm.
And for me, it was about actually, I was quite disappointed not to see a G-Shock of some kind on her wrist in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, I was like I said, and when you point that out, like the fact that it's kind of a slab side G-Shocky,
Mm,
type of thing. I almost wanted this to be an Iron Man because again, of the partnership back
yeah,
in the early aughts, having it be a throwback to Timex, I thought would have been better. So this is
yeah,
my because the Tomb Raider is a long span, so I couldn't just pick one. So I'm kind of doing Lara Croft as a character.
yeah.
And in this version, like, okay, G-Shock, she's, semester at sea, doing a research thing, type of thing. Okay, I get it.
Mm,
In the early aughts,
yeah.
actually, when Angelina Jolie played the character, they had a partnership with Tissot when they had the T-Touch, which was on her wrist. And that one, I think you only saw that one in Cradle of Light. I don't think it was in the first one. Don't quote me on that one. I can't remember.
Mm,
But I can even appreciate this being referenced in the old film, not the new film like you're pointing out.
mhm,
Because again, Angelina Jolie portraying that version of Lara, the U2, the band era of Lara Croft. This kind of fit. It's analog. It has an aggressive explorer vibe. It has some sort of technology, kind of like the James Bond
mm.
vibe, and it fits for that version of Lara. Um,
And it's a
for
cool watch.
and it is actually, and I looked it up. I looked it up. It actually is kind of a cool, cool Tissot. I'm not gonna lie. Um,
It's a
moving,
Tissot that I would own. So to me, that
yeah,
is default. If it's a watch that I would own, I would say
fair,
it's a cool watch, right?
fair.
It's got a compass built into it as well.
It has
It's
like
kind of got
a
it's kind of
thermo.
got. I think it's like an Altibaro, I think equivalent.
Yeah,
Just in a metal case, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool watch.
It is. It. Yeah, even by contemporary standards. Because again,
Mm,
I mean that watch is 25 years old. Ish. Like it is kind of cool by even today's standards. But moving forward in the franchise, because the three contemporary games, the last one kind of puts a good bookend on it. The thing that I'd like to see out of it as they move forward with this type of thing. Yes, there's the anime cartoon on Netflix. I don't appreciate it. It's not. I don't think it's the greatest. Um, I would want them to. You're gonna love this. She's British. She's done all this expedition. She survived the trauma that is those expeditions. And if anything, she should reward herself with a watch. And so, if here's a partnership opportunity for Elliot Brown, if you ask me, Elliot Brown needs to partner with the Tomb Raider franchise and get a DLC version of the Blockworth Hallie on her wrist in the game. I think that would be the quintessential, and not because I like
mhm,
Elliot Brown, but it's British, it's rugged, kind of like the Tissot throwback.
mhm.
It is it can be feminine, but also again, it is expedition worthy if it was in a DLC, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um, and she could put it on a rubber strap. I would hope it would be orange. See
Rescue
previous
Orange.
pods. Um, but also it's in this contemporary version of Lara. It's not the Angelina Jolie. She's a rich bitch type of person. It's not the 1990s version where it's Timex because it's utilitarian and this is back in the days where cell phones weren't a thing. And I feel like this new iteration would be something a little bit more refined, British brand, and that could be covertly, if I can, covertly adventure. And I feel like a DLC Hallie would fit the bill for this one. So that is my rundown for Lara Croft Over the Ages.
Nice. I like it. I appreciated a lot of those references. Um, Particularly locking the butler in the cupboard. But yeah, man, I mean,
He
what
was
a cool
creepy.
watch he was.
He just
What a
wants you to
cool
have tea.
he does, yeah. I mean, it's quintessentially British, AJ. What's the problem? We wanted you to have
Well
tea and you
played.
threw it in the river.
I love
All
that.
right.
I love
We
that
wanted
taste
you
of
to have
freedom.
tea.
Love that
Yeah,
taste of freedom.
we wanted you to have tea. You threw it in the river, and now, funny enough, you want tea again. Um, I like it. Yeah, and also what I like is the fact that yeah, you've gone through the whole swath
Yeah,
of Tomb Raider watches there, which is really cool because I didn't know about the Carabiner
yeah.
watch. I won't lie to you. Um,
Post on
but
the Analog Explorer's website, by the way.
I've seen the photo, but I didn't realize it was that. So yeah, no, cool watch. But I also like that, yeah, the fact that they've kind of brought it into like in terms of gaming franchise. Like I said, I just want to know how they signed off on getting those references into the cutscenes, really.
Yeah,
But yeah, I feel like the latest film kind of missed the trick on getting a G-Shock onto her wrist to reference back because everything else was really accurate.
yeah.
You know, what I also like about that film and that game is that she doesn't get her guns until the end.
Nope.
It's
Well, and again, and that's what I appreciated in that, even that initial reboot of the game is as a survivalist on an island with a bunch of mercenaries, you have to do the best with what you got.
mm,
And so, that's why, having uh, an ice axe on an island, which is kind of weird, but like, again, it was that scrounging bit and that,
mm,
trying to survive. And here is a woman, a young woman who going through uni and stuff, probably never held a gun, so like learning on the fly, trying to survive, bow and arrow, because you have bits and bobs on an island. I mean, it fit a lot more than the hoity-toity, rich,
mm,
affluent woman who can just go anywhere and do anything with a pair of 45s. Like I said, I appreciate the pivot, and like I said, I was very when they first announced it and they were doing this whole redo. I was very anti, like how dare you type of a thing
mm,
until I played that first 30 minutes of the game and I was like, I will retract everything because
mm.
this is brilliant. So,
Yeah, very cool. Bro, my second pick is a book series turned Amazon series,
oh,
screen book to film screen adaptation. We've spoken about it before.
oh,
So I'm going to bring up the Terminal List. So
oh, nice.
there you go. So I know you're doing the screen sharing, so if you want to type that in, you can. Type in the Terminal List, and I'm going to focus on two watches that were in there. One which I have personal experience with the brand, which is really cool, and then the other one I have seen in real life.
Hmm.
But we'll speak about the one that I've seen. So points he wears. Well, actually, him and his best mate, uh, were Oris Acquises,
Yeah,
DLC Oris Acquises. And obviously, it's very obvious that when you see an Oris Acquis in anything, because it's got those very narrow lugs and that very uh, proprietary rubber strap, is one better expression to
yeah,
say that. But all the way through that series, there is actually some nice watches. There's another character in there who wears a Panerai, for example. I'm not quite sure which Luminor it is, but there's a Panerai. There's G-Shocks in there and stuff like that. So some good watch references in general. But yeah,
hmm,
so it's good to see. In fact, the scene that's just up there now is actually the one where you'll see him if you were to watch that episode where he looks down at his wrist and pulls his Glock up and he's got an Oris on his wrist, which is quite cool.
yeah,
Very capable watch, quite dressy, I think, in terms of it could, as a diver, and I believe the Oris Aquis is 500 meters water resistant as well,
I think so.
or something stupid like that. Very
It's a very capable
dressy
watch.
for
Yeah.
very capable, but quite dressy even for a DLC watch. I also think, in my circles within the watch fam, that actually Oris and particularly the Aquis actually probably doesn't get enough love that it probably should do. And I would probably say that is actually down to the fact that it has that very narrow lugs
Lug
and
situation.
the proprietary bracelet style and rubber strap options. I think that obviously to me is actually for me is a reason why I don't own one and I've never owned one is because I'd have to wear it and you wouldn't be able to change it, and as we know, we all like rescue orange. So it's one of those. So, but very, very cool watch. Like I said, people in the watch fam who I speak to who have owned these watches or have owned these watches have had a great time with them.
Hmm.
And particularly like when you look at, modern Oris iterations and limited editions are quite cool when it comes to, saving the ocean and all that kind of stuff. So nice watch. The watch, however, that is, I'd say is a little bit more contemporary in design because it has normal lug width. Um, is a watch that I've got is a watch by a company that I've got experience with, and that is
Hmm.
Resco. So Resco is a US Navy SEAL veteran owned brand, by a guy called Robert E. Smith. Okay, hence Res, and then it's Co for company. So Robert E. Smith Company makes Resco watches, and they're out of Coronado, which is obviously the home of U.S. Navy Special Warfare. And he basically, there's an interview on YouTube, which I'll put a link into into the show notes. But effectively, when he went away on all of his various deployments around the world with special forces, instead of playing video games, instead of reading, instead of doing all that kind of stuff, he took apart people's watches and he learned and then did all that kind of stuff. So he became known as a watch guy. Eventually, clearly got to a position where he could, sink investment and capital into making his own watches. Um, they claim, and I say claim because obviously I've never met anyone from the company. I can only take off the interviews and face value on what I've read. But they obviously claim that the first iterations of all the watches have been tested and basically was sold to his community, which is the U.S. Navy SEALs. And you know what? I don't doubt it. For me, everything that I've read, all the other people who I've engaged with who own Rescos, and they got a very loyal following, by the way. Um, they got no reason to lie about it. I have seen a couple of special iterations of Rescos, particularly just for SEAL teams. So they've got
Hmm.
engravings on the back, very nice
Hmm.
engravings on the back. The watches themselves are no change. Maybe a hand color change is kind of what he does, or a different print motif on the dial, but nothing in terms of the intricacies that maybe you'd expect on like an Elliot Brown or Bremont special project. He does a lot with laser engravings on the back. And he's also done a lot of collaborations with other American veteran-owned companies and or American independent companies, such as Half Face Blades. Just so you're
Hmm.
aware, I'm not a knife guy. I know that the logo is pretty cool though, because the watch that they did with Half Face Blades was like half an American Indian kind of staring at you, which is quite cool. On the case back. So does various things like that. He also does a watch which supports an underwater charity and all that kind of stuff as well,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
is quite interesting. The logo for those watches are a little walrus. So there you go. But the watch in particular that James Reese wears, or his character wears in the screen adaptation, is a Generation 2 Black Frog watch. Um, Very cool. Pretty much all blacked out bar the hands. Okay, so the dial actually has no luminescence in it whatsoever.
Yeah, this is a dark watch.
Very dark watch. The hands offer the luminescence and then the pip on the bezel. Um, Now, again, from interviews that I've listened to on the Jack Carr podcast, and for the books, and obviously conversations when Jack Carr was involved with the adaptation from book to film. um, Chris Pratt, who plays James Reese, actually chose that watch, which is quite cool. So he had a little bit of an influence in there. He was always going to wear a Resco because in the books, funny enough, until about I think it's book 5 of 7 off the top of my head, or
Hmm.
what, or 3 of 5, I can't remember. I've got them all. I've listened to them multiple times. Um, the character James Reese wears his Resco constantly until he starts wearing his dad's Rolex. Okay, I'm not going to go into it any further. I know a
Yeah.
lot of the audience have watched the series, listened to the books, read the books, and stuff like that. So I'm probably no plot spoiler in there. But what I like in terms of Jack Carr's kind of world, bringing to life the character of James Reese and the other characters within the series, is he exudes a bit of personality with them. So, and what I mean by that is that he shows you that he was involved in that world by referencing things, even if it's just a name, or a model of something, which obviously is very reminiscent to that community. So it'll be something like, James Reese gets up in the morning, puts his shoes on. Could have very well been a sentence in the book. He doesn't do that. James Reese gets up in the morning and he looks for his Salomon GTX trainers, is
Yeah.
like the line, right? And he'll go that level of detail. He doesn't just check the time on his watch, he checks the time on his Resco watch. It's little things like that which nod to other things that obviously clearly held a bit of importance for Jack Carr as a person, and he's obviously written his personality into those pages, and those have been translated into TV series, which I like. Um, Resco actually provided 3 watches to the crew
Hmm.
for those watches, and after those watches were actually sold by the company, or 2 of them were at least, because I'm pretty sure Chris Pratt actually kept one.
Hmm.
But yeah, those watches went for a pretty penny across the kind of loyal following of Resco,
Cool.
because of that TV series, which I think is quite cool. I don't own a Black Frog. I own a Patriot, a Resco Patriot Gen 1. For those who are reticent of buying a Resco out there, I'd implore anyone to try and get hold of one. They're quite hard,
Yeah.
particularly in Europe, to get hold of. And the reason for that is because after COVID, they basically stopped all international shipping. I think they was just losing too many watches. So you have to have a good friend to take receipt of a watch, which is always good. And they are quite expensive for what they are.
They are.
I'm not going to say they're not. There is a way to kind of save a little bit of money. Obviously, if you are serving or ex-serving, they do honor military discount. And then also, because they're a small company and they have the ability to do this, they actually do watches out of what they kind of call seconds. So sometimes
Right.
there will be cases with case backs that have slight marks on them through effectively shipping, through actually making the process. However, Kevin, the watchmaker there, is obviously very good, and Mrs. Robert E. Smith does the day-to-day running of the website, the shop, and all that kind of stuff. So they actually do put up watches as well if you're on their Facebook group. And they'll have like a line of like a batch of watches, and they'll say, right, these are all factory seconds. They've got slight marks on places that you wouldn't notice, and there'll be slight marks that actually, to be honest, you'd probably put into the watch yourself after wearing it for a few months, and they'll sell them with a little bit more discount because they're a small independent watch company. They can do that, and I think that's a great way for people to buy into a brand that maybe they might not necessarily have the ability to access without that. It
100%.
improves the watch. I say what the other side of it as well is it improves customer service between a very small independent with a client base. And at the end of the day, these are tool watches, right? Does it really matter that there's a tiny scratch on one lug on the underside where you can't
Nope.
see? Doesn't
Not
bother
at all.
me. Am I probably going to put it there myself? Probably. You know, and I think that has enabled this company to have such a loyal following. I'm not ever about to say buy a watch for an investment, but you're definitely not buying a Resco for investment because
No.
there's no such thing. You're buying that because you want a Resco. I have enjoyed my Rescos. I've got 2 of them now. And the other thing that Resco also do, which is quite cool, is if you get a little bit bored with your Resco and how it's set up, you can send it back to Resco HQ to have either a tune-up, a movement swap, with which they now offer quartz, kinetic, and automatic. Just so you're aware, which is always good. And they also offer stuff like changing of handsets and stuff like that to make it
Hmm.
personal. So that's quite a nice way if you want a different second hand all of a sudden, send your quartz watch in to get a battery change and it comes out with a new movement and a new handset. You might fall in love with your watch in a different way again. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
totally.
they also send all those bits back to you as well, like a proper service center. So it's not
Proper.
like they just take it off you and kind of like, mug you off to the high port. They send it all back, which is quite nice. I've never had a problem with Resco. The only problem I've got is that they don't send them internationally. So that's my only gripe. Resco, if you're listening, not that you are, but Resco, if you are listening, please start sending back internationally because COVID is over and in terms of lockdown and mail anyway. And I know that there would be a lot more, I think, interest, particularly in Europe, within the community that listens to this podcast, for
Hmm.
example. So yeah, that is my second pick, bro. Resco and Oris.
That's solid picks, dude. I didn't realize that that was going to be your dovetail. That's cool. For my last pick, this is kind of the watch that I have a hot take because everybody for some reason when the HBO show came out had in the Watchfam had their opinion and stuff, and so I'm going. Everybody's what would you say the last episode we recorded? Everybody's entitled to my opinion. So
Yeah.
there is a company called Naughty Dogs. Now, Naughty Dogs in the gaming sphere is hands down probably the best storytellers I feel in all of gamedom. And quite frankly, I think they're the best storytellers, full stop. They did a franchise called The Last of Us, which is basically about this fungus that basically turns humans into zombies type of a thing because it's based off of this actual real cordyceps that what they do is they get into the brain and the functions of like ants and animals and get them into the most, not just into mammals, but into humans and what that would do to the world. Now, Naughty Dogs also did another franchise that I absolutely love called Uncharted. And up until, I mean, like I said, Tomb Raider, my formative years was probably the biggest franchise I spent the most time in up until the Uncharted series and Nathan
Mhm.
Drake, which is where the inspiration that my wife bought me this Doxa from is this would be like this watch encapsulates the vibe of the entire series of Nathan Drake. But in Last of Us, and so that's the preface to Naughty Dogs and where they kind of come from. So very story driven, action based gaming, more so than Tomb Raider. In it, you have Joel, who's the main protagonist, and Ellie, who comes in later in the game as a job for him to basically get her to this Firefly out camp type of thing. Now, Joel, at the beginning of the game, you see him before all of this goes down, and he's a working dad and stuff, and he gets a watch from his daughter, and this was also encapsulated in the HBO show. Now, in the game, there is a very predominant, like the watch is literally part of the story arc
Mhm.
because it's the last thing, spoilers, that his daughter gives him before he loses her. And
Mhm.
it is this field pilot esque watch with a non central seconds, a sub-second at 6. And he wears this broken watch through the entire game. And you also see it on the wrist of, oh man, I totally spaced on the actor's name. Uh, oh, it'll come to me. Anyway, you see him wear it through the entire HBO rendition of it as well. Well, this was a Naughty Dog, just like in Uncharted. Uncharted also, their characters wear watches. They're completely unbranded. There's nothing. They just made them up. Um, there is no like analog equivalent in the real world, and so
Yeah.
that got people thinking like, what would this watch be? Is there a partnership in the works? What could it be? And a lot of people had some really interesting hot takes, and Jenny L had a breakdown of it as well and stuff. And you know, I feel like watch. No offense, watch fam. You got to be a gamer and know the history of like everything that leads
Mhm.
up to the franchise and then evaluate the watch. Not go into it watch first because a lot of people were looking at Laco and they were looking at Hamilton and they're looking at
Mhm.
and that's a watch fam person looking at it and superimposing what
Yeah.
cool watch du jour would be on the wrist. And that's backwards. So you have to remember that Joel was a working dad, taking
Mhm.
care of his daughter. And this was given to him by his daughter. Matter of fact, it's kind of alluded that maybe she swiped it, type of thing.
Mhm.
And it later, to me, there's only one kind of watch brand and watch aesthetic that fits that bill. It's quartz. Although in the HBO show, they did something very humorous where she takes the watch to a watchmaker and he has to fix a spring in a quartz watch. It's really kind of
Brilliant.
funny. But to me, it would have to be a Citizen Eco Drive, something that she could have gotten out of a boutique or a mall. And there
Mhm.
is a Citizen Eco Drive, water resistant to 100 meters, a sub-seconds. This one has a date. And if you really want to know, I think the reference number is in typical Citizen fashion. It's horrible. It's BV 1060-07E if you want to look up the exact model I have on screen. But it's $100 USD watch. It 43 millimeters. It's a no nonsense watch. And the important part to remember in the story arc of The Last of Us,
Mhm.
Joel's wearing a broken watch. So
Yeah.
it's not about who was on that label, which is what I appreciate the fact that Naughty Dog, in typical fashion, they just made up a watch. He has a military background, so obviously having a military-esque watch would fit the bill. His daughter would know that, something that's easy legible, something that he wouldn't. He's a working stiff. He wouldn't care. It's more the fact that it came from his daughter.
Yeah.
And so this, to me, is what's missing in most reviews that I've seen of the series is that they forgot to look. They're looking at the watch and not the person. And
Mm.
so that's I don't come with hot takes that often, but this one has set with me for a while. And so for me, Citizen Eco Drive, sub-second, Black Dial, Eco Drive, because again, Joel wouldn't care about automatic
Mhm.
or kinetic or anything. He just wants to know that it would always work, and he got it from his daughter. So,
And
uh,
in the scenario of an apocalypse, it would keep working if he hadn't broke it.
exactly. And like I said, I don't want to give spoilers, but there's a reason why that watch is broken. So,
Yeah. It was Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal, thank you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I stumbled on his name. Yes, awesome actor. So yeah, Pedro Pascal also wears, in typical fashion, the broken watch through the series, which I appreciate. And there's a lot of beautiful Easter eggs from the game. I will go on record. Video game renditions to film suck. Uncharted, sorry, it sucked. Like everything Tomb Raider in the 90s, Angelina Jolie, horrible rendition. I will state that HBO and Naughty Dogs, who had a heavy hand in help producing this is the best video game to a film TV rendition in history. I've never seen another rendition that encapsulated everything, all the nuances, all the emotion, all the in-game actions, like what HBO did for the Last of Us series. And I cannot wait to see what they do for part two.
Nice.
Yep,
I will admit to you, I've not even seen the HBO series yet.
you need
I
to,
think it was one of those. Yeah, people were hyping it. I was busy, and then I've got to that point where I, I've got some free space. I can
or play
actually
the
get around
game.
to watching it. Yeah, I mean, I've got some free space to watch the series, so I'll get around to watching it eventually. But it's
Yeah,
kind of like one of those where I don't think I was. I think I was because people had hyped it up so much, and it was very for me because it was HBO. It's one of those where have we hyped it up like Game of Thrones? And then I went and obviously watched House of the Dragon, and it's like
oh,
that was okay, could have been better. Or am I going to put in time to something that is so hyped, but they're not worth it, like the last series of Game of Thrones, which was awful.
yes,
So I wasn't ready personally, AJ, for that level of disappointment in my life. But now that the hype's dying down and people are still saying it's good, I will probably get around to watching it.
yeah.
Nice watch choice as well. So there you go. Um, I've got one more watch. So my final watch, and this is my option that I would change because it just to me it doesn't really make sense. Well, it does make sense because it makes sense because of the actor who wore it and the fact that he likes this company. It doesn't make sense for the character that he plays. And clearly it was just, I think, a little bit of a cash grab for the company to come
Okay.
back into the limelight in the early 2000s. Personally, what do you think it is? You look at me.
I know. I'm trying to think. I need a genre here. Is it
Sci-fi.
sci-fi? Uh, Aliens?
No,
Hmm.
you got one more, and I'm gonna go into it.
Shoot. Uh, I want to. The Expanse.
No,
Dang. Okay. I'm out.
cool. Um, sorry, we're dealing with a cold over at the Zulu Time podcast headquarters right now. Um, I keep managing to either mute successfully or half mute, so you just have to put up with it while I talk about this watch because that's life, guys. But the watch is an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore chronograph, as worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 3: The Rise of the Machines. It's rats. All right. My problem isn't that it's just that it's rats. It just doesn't make sense. Okay. So in terms of the watch, in terms of why it's in the film, we all know that Arnold Schwarzenegger likes a big watch.
Oh yeah.
Right. We also know that
Big dude.
Arnold Schwarzenegger likes watches. Okay. It's very similar to Sylvester Stallone in that he likes watches. This watch was done as a collaboration limited edition for the film Terminator 3: The Rise of the Machines. Now, what I mean by this is obviously they're trying to bring this was I say was probably the first big relaunch of Terminator, because Terminator 1 and 2 we just kind of accept as the OG classics, and I would argue limit the point, and it's not a hill I'm willing to die on, to be honest. But I would say that Terminator 2 is probably loved more than Terminator 1.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, there's an argument there to be had, at least. But for most people who grew up in the who were born in the early 90s, obviously watched Terminator 2 at some point, probably before they were eight, rightly or wrongly. And then obviously Terminator 3 comes out, Rise of the Machines, and then you're old enough to go to the cinema and watch this because this is the 12A. Comes out, and I just think it was one of those where if you look at kind of what was happening in the early 2000s when this film was released, look at the state of the Swiss watch industry. You know, AJ, you've got Google up there, bro. When was this film actually released?
I think it was
Because I can't
2000 and
remember.
I believe it was 2003. I'll double check
Yeah,
that here in a sec.
yeah, that's what I mean. So like, look at early 2000s. Look at the state of the Swiss watch industry from what we kind of all know about. Put it this way, like it was probably up and come yeah, not up and coming, but you know what I mean, like people weren't I don't it just I don't think it was as prevalent,
Hmm.
unless you were into watches, in terms of that kind of stuff. Look at the fact that Amiga had to partner with James Bond to rescue themselves in the late 90s,
Right.
is what I'm getting at.
There
So
you go.
was Audemars Piguet in a similar state in the early 2000s where they needed a quick cash influx and get their watches back onto the screen again? And, we know that Arnold Schwarzenegger wears big and expensive watches. Was this one of those where it was a natural fit of the actor, not so much the character? And the reason why I say that is because even though it's a chronograph, I get that chronographs is a complication. It's got a date. It's got,
Yeah.
so you could argue time traveling, unstoppable, killing robot, would need a chronograph,
Right.
for the time travel and the date so that he knows. However, he's a robot, so he's probably got it in his head anyway. He doesn't actually need a watch.
Yeah.
Um, and looking at the design cue on the watch, there's elements of the watch that looks very aggressive,
Hmm.
from the bezel with the screws, which obviously, yes, we know that is obviously nautical. However, I think that fits for, the design and the aesthetic that Terminator is going for. It's going for industrial, kind of futuristic, made by machines kind of thing. And, even with the weird crown guards and chronograph pusher guards on that case watch, which kind of looks like a knuckle duster, right? It looks
Aggressive.
aggressive, awful. I'm just gonna say awful. Just a trope of early 2000s design.
Oh,
Um,
it's neo vintage.
oh, it's fucking awful, AJ. It is, right. So yeah. Um, this watch was worn by the Terminator in the film. Okay. Fine. Okay, cool. That's kind of where we're gonna leave that. I don't think it suits. So I'm now gonna give you my alternative
Yeah.
watch. And my alternative watch is a Casio G-Shock Rangeman.
Ooh.
Now, I've owned one of these. Okay, firstly, I've owned the generation before this generation, I think is the way to um, word it. Because I don't know if they do generations in numbers for Casio, to be perfectly honest. Um, but I own the, yeah, I've owned that previous version, right? So the watch itself is unforgivably huge. It's very angular. It's still analog input in terms of it's got physical buttons to press,
Hmm.
which is quite good. So it's not touch screen. Okay, but I mean, in the latest generation of this watch, let me just throw out some of the stuff that it's got on there. It's got GPS navigation, it's got backtrack, it's got point memory, it's got a ceramic case back this time instead of a steel. It's considered a tough construction. Okay, so the ability to, it's kind of waterproof, dustproof, mud resistant, all that kind of stuff, temperature fluctuations, and it's even got a carbon fiber insert now in the band,
Mm.
sapphire crystals, all that kind of stuff. It's got a GPS antenna as well, and now even features solar and wireless charging, unlike my last one, which I believe was just solar.
Hmm.
Um, Big, capable adventure watch, right? And the reason why I think that this watch suits a Terminator, be it a good one or a bad one, better, is because of the amount of technology in the Terminator compared to and the amount of technology in this fucking watch, right? You know, this watch can give you tide and moon, it can give you sunrise, sunset. It's always linked to a GPS satellite, so the time is never wrong, no matter where you are in the world, and it's robust. You could run the watch over, and I'm sure the watch will come off better than your car. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's huge, right? It fits the character of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator or Terminator T1000 model very, very well. You know, and I don't know about you. I know it's another Japan reference, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know why. I've maybe because I've just watched the recent anime series of it. But I always think a little bit of Japanese influence when I watch Terminator in terms of the actual machine itself.
yeah,
I think it's maybe because there's a lot of anime references that are Ghost in the Machine, machines,
yes,
and the underlying tones of what is life, right? And which is always trying to kind of like bring into there in terms of those kind of sci-fi, that sci-fi genre of AI and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that watch fits better with the character, or the Terminator franchise in general.
100%.
So yeah, that's the watch that I would change. It's also a very Zulu Time podcast watch
Yeah,
in terms of adventure, military, law enforcement, travel, and getting out and doing stuff with your watch. You know, you cannot turn around and say to me that that watch cannot survive everything. You know what I mean? If someone owns that watch and they take it off to wash the dishes, they need to reevaluate themselves.
Wait, you can take a shower with it? Is that what you're saying? You could take a shower with your
Yeah,
range
yeah.
man. You could have a drink
You
poolside
can,
with your range man.
yeah, you can fall into the pool, shallow into the pool with your arrangement on. That's my pick. That's my final pick.
Love it.
Um, so yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed our As Seen on Screen. I like the fact that AJ's gaming and film references were actually not just games, they actually do have TV and screen adaptations as well. Um, I often enjoy the games, guys, if that's what you want to do, or go and watch the screen adaptations of those franchises. I hope you enjoyed the films that I've pulled up as well, for my ones. But just as a quick summary, AJ, just summarize your three that you've got there. Obviously, because it'll help me in the show notes.
Does the AI do your show notes these days? So my
Mm,
picks, we started off with the Omega Seamaster 300, the 1997 version for the GoldenEye video game, which also was on Pierce Brosnan's wrist in the franchise. And then I went over to Lara Croft and spanned the 3 decades of Lara Croft from the 90s all the way up to the mid-century, the U2 generation with Angelina Jolie and the Tissot,
mhm.
and then so Timex Tissot to G-Shock, which I thought was unfortunate, and it should have been a partnership with Elliot Brown to make it more British with the Blockworth Halley in DLC Black. And then lastly, fixing everybody's critique of Joel's watch in Last of Us. His daughter should have given him a solar-powered Citizen Eco Drive with a non-central seconds at 6.
Nice. And I started with a bit more nostalgia in order to try and top off and try and beat AJ's initial recommendation, which I'd actually like to think that I will concede and say that you won.
It's
I
not a
with
competition,
Back to
bro.
the Future, yeah, with Back to the Future and the Casio calculator watch. I then moved on to the terminal list where we looked at Resco and Oris, and then obviously finishing off with the Royal Oak Offshore, that absolute hunk of shit. Um, and then swapping it out for a cool watch called Arrangement. Also, just realised I've done like two quartz digital watches for the first
Mhm.
time in a very long time. Have I referenced that in the podcast? So there you go, guys. Throwing out some love to digital watches for the first time in a long time as well. Um, Bro, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the mic. We're getting to that part of the episode now where we have to, unfortunately, go into closing notes. and basically let the audience, go about their day and not have to listen to us talk about watches for a bit until obviously the next episode. But Bro, you're my guest, so please take it away with your closing note.
My closing note is a random mini doc. It's 14 and a half minutes long, and it doesn't fit within the scope of the theme of today, but like I really liked what this dude did. It's on the YouTube channel Fern, and it is the ancient computer that simply shouldn't exist. And it fits within the Watchfam because it's talking about, and forgive my poor Greek here, the Antikythera mechanism that was discovered um, in ancient Greece, which is these cogs and wheels that the technology doesn't fit the time frame of the wreck that they found it on. And for several years in different explorers, even Jacques Cousteau did some exploration on this wreck. It started off with basically a sponge diver, tethered, old copper collar days and stuff. Discovering this wreck, they find a whole bunch of ancient Greek stuff with this big bronze glob that they brought up. It cracks open, and in it they find these ancient looking wheels and cogs that does not fit the era, and thus the Antikythera machine. Nico over the antiquarian horologist is probably laughing as she listens to the episode, slaughtering this name here. But in recent years, apparently, through all of the new sonar and LiDAR and scans and stuff that we have done on this thing, we have a better idea of what this machine could have been. And basically, it is an analog calculating computer for things like astrology and probably even tide and time, and as well as the calendar and such. Do they suspect that it was the most accurate thing? No, but with the science of the time, it's really super impressive. Anyway, I love the CGI that this guy did to bring this thing to life. And if you've never heard of this thing, it's really cool. Look it up. Yeah. So anyway, that's my pick. The ancient computer that simply should not exist on YouTube, on the Fern YouTube channel.
Nice. Definitely something that Lara Croft would have found, mate, at some point in her next film.
Oh, totally. Well, I think they referenced this actually in the Dial of Destiny, I think.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do, and that's where I'd heard of it before. And I was
Got
like,
it.
yes, I do actually know what you're on about. So mine is not as adventurous or as old. To be perfectly honest, it could be adventurous, I suppose. It's another audiobook, as always. I want to keep a tradition. I always give you an audiobook. This audiobook is, well, the original book is written by an author called David McCloskey. He, oddly enough, and keeping a tradition, writes espionage thrillers. And he's done a couple of series that follow different characters. I'm on one series at the moment. There's not many series many books in this series. There's another one that follows a different kind of story arc, and different characters, and I think as well set in a slightly different time. But the book I've got to recommend for you today is called Damascus Station. Okay, and it follows a CIA handler conducting operations in Damascus. So if that sounds like something interesting for you, go check it out. It's kind of just after like the Syrian civil war kind of era. So like you're looking like 2015, kind of the Arab Spring kind of time. So like 2010s kind of time setting for it. Very interesting. And obviously for those who have actually been to Damascus, it's probably quite accurate in terms of the places, locations, all that kind of stuff. And he obviously goes on to write another book, which is not set in Damascus, but follows similar characters, but within that story arc called Moscow X. So there's two, well, technically 1.5. I can't tell you actually if Moscow X is any good yet, because I am like 4 chapters into it. So far, it's good. Can't tell you if it's good in the end. I will get back to you at another episode podcast recording, and I'll let you know if Moscow X is actually worth listening to. So far, I'm pleased. So there you go. So that is my closing notes for today's episode. AJ, thank you very much for coming on the pod. Thank you for taking As Seen on Screen to a different level in terms of the interpretation of seeing a watch on screen.